Good morning from Jeff's Little Engine Service. Today's project is this Homelite Pressure Washer. It has a 179cc Honda engine on it, and the engine doesn't run very well. It's hard to start, sputters. It'll run with the choke on a little bit, but I suspect it's time to clean out the fuel system on this thing, and new spark plug and change the oil and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to show you how we'll put this pressure washer back in tip-top shape. And you know, from the looks of it, it looks like it's been a few years since it's been serviced, so I can almost guarantee that the fuel tank has sediment in it, and the carburetor as well. So we're going to clean out the fuel system on this machine to make sure that everything's running clean. One of the first things I noticed, it looks like the customer's been trying to figure things out here on his own. By the looks of that spark plug, you see how dirty it is. It's old and rusty, so it's definitely time to replace that. It's going to be good as new, Bo, I swear. You don't believe me. So we're going to start out with a 10mm socket here and get into the carburetor area. And you can see we have these two bolts here, or two nuts here, that we need to remove to get this cover off. Kind of hard to get to this one. Might have to use a box end wrench. Hopefully there's room to get this out of here with this bar in the way. Let's see, I think I'm going to take this air filter off. Some of these screw on, this one just pops off. Yeah, you have a breather hose on the back side here that you need to disconnect. That breather hose there needs to be disconnected. It just pulls right out. Well, we are definitely stuck. I can't get this plate out from behind that bar there. I have to figure out what to do. You know, I might have to take out these motor mount bolts and, you know, leave one in and then just swivel the engine a little bit to get some room. I'll have to think about this. Well, no matter how much I cuss at it, it's not going to come out of there until I either hack this off, which I'm not going to do, or loosen the motor mount bolts and swivel the engine a little bit. I think. Well, no sense crying about it. Just do it. That one was kind of loose. Alright, have to take out that bolt. Sometimes these bolts can be a real pain in the butt to get to on these pressure washers. This one isn't too bad. Take out that bolt, and then I'll loosen the two on the other side and just take one of them out so I can slide the engine. Okay, so I loosened up these bolts, motor mount bolts, so I can swing this engine just like that, and now I can get this piece off, hopefully, unless the tire's in the way now. And if you move these levers to the proper position, it comes off easier. Alright, finally. Now we can get into this carburetor and figure out what's going on. So you see on this particular Honda engine, you have your fuel on-off valve here. This is your choke lever, and this is your fuel on-off lever. On the bottom of this component, you have a little float bowl, just like you do on your carburetor here. And you'll want to take that off. It's a 10 millimeter on the bottom, and you'll want to clean off the inside of it. Sometimes there's a screen in there that needs to be clean. You definitely want to make sure that the gasket is in good shape. Good old 10 millimeter gets you pretty far on these Honda engines. Alright. So this kind of acts as a little sediment bowl. You can see that's the gasket right there. And if I pour out this gas, you'll see all the sediment. See all the sediment in there? It all floats to the bottom of this little bowl. It's quite a bit. And then the clean gas stays on top. And that's what goes into your carburetor. So it's kind of like a fuel filter. Old school style fuel filter. They used to use glass ones back in the old day. And you'll also want to check up in there. I don't know if you can see anything with my camera, but you'll want to make sure all that's clean. A lot of times that's where that screen is that you can take out and clean. Now is a good time to take off this fuel line too. It's like I have a clamp down here. Some of these clamps are a real pain in the butt. I'm gonna have to put the camera down to get that off. Yeah, sometimes you just have to destroy them suckers to get them off. Especially the Honda ones, they're a pain in the butt. Okay, so I finally got the fuel line off, and I'm just draining out the gas tank because we're going to want to make sure that we have a nice clean gas tank. Ah, crap, it looks like it's full. It's kind of like watching paint dry. Mesmerizing, and it takes forever. It's like a beautiful waterfall. Sometimes you have to get brutal. And I gave it a piece of my mind, believe me. So I have the bowl all cleaned out, and the gasket's clean enough. And I'm going to go ahead and put it back in place. Get it a little bit wet, make it easier to install. Tight enough. And what we need to do to take these linkages off is we basically just push this linkage that way, and it pulls. Oops. You turn it that way and it pulls right out. And you can take the spring off here. That carburetor should be ready to come off. Oops. Still have gas draining apparently. And we should just be able to, don't lose that gasket. Gosh, I might have to take this damn tire off. I can't get this carburetor past it. Damn, pain in the ass. Alright, took that piece of crap off. Now I can take off this. And we're going to make sure that the inside of this carburetor is good and clean. So we have the carburetor off here. There's a few different styles of these carburetors. On this particular model, the choke lever will just come right off. But one thing we're going to want to do right off the bat is take off this float bowl so we can see how contaminated the carburetor is. We've already looked in here and cleaned that out. Okay, so I always like to show what's in the carburetors. sure you guys can see all that sediment floating around in there. Like all that dirt. That's no good. And it looks like our gasket came off with the float bowl, which is okay. We can just try and clean it up. These are much easier to put back together if they stay either on the carburetor or on the float bowl like this. But as you can see, this carburetor is in pretty good shape. It's pretty clean. So I'm pleased to see that. I think what I'm going to do is take out that main jet, which is located down in there. Some models you need a special screwdriver to take it out. Other models you can just use a skinny screwdriver to take it out. You gotta be careful not to strip this out. It's just a little piece of brass. This main jet down in here, it can strip quite easily. Sometimes it can be tough to get them out. You have to, oh, there they come. See that? So you have your main jet here, and this is your nozzle. And if you look close, oops, your main jet here, you have a little hole going through it. Your main jet, you have a little hole you want to make sure is good and cleared out. And the same thing with your nozzle here, except if you look closely, you'll see there's a bunch of little holes that need to be cleaned out, as well as down through the tube. So you'll want to clean these components real well before you reinstall. And I think I'll take out the float and the float valve, just so I can get things clean down in there. And you can see how that is assembled, just like that. Now I don't think I'm going to rebuild this carburetor. I am just cleaning it out because I think all the components are still in pretty good shape and everything's still clean. So we're good, but I will get a brush, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's quite a bit of crud around where the O-ring seats. So you'll want to clean all that out before you reassemble. And clean down in the nozzle hole there, just to make sure everything is spotless. And you can see corrosion actually inside the carburetor here, so we'll want to make sure to clean all that stuff out. On some of these Honda carburetors, there's a slow jet that you have to remove right here, but this one, it looks like it's plugged off. Alright, so I've cleaned things out a little bit here, and it's time to go back together. We'll put the nozzle back in place now that it's all good and cleaned out, and the main jet. And you want to be careful not to tighten this down too tight, because it will strip pretty easily. Alright, right about, I'll show you how tight. That tight. Looks like the gasket came off while I was cleaning it. That's alright. I'm going to reuse this gasket too because it's still in good shape, and I don't have one. I just need to clean it up a little bit. So I'm just using a little bit of carburetor cleaner and a brush. Clean it out the best I can and put it back into position here. A lot of times your gaskets can swell when you take them out. Carburetor cleaner can make them swell. If that happens to you, you can just leave it out in the sun, let it dry out thoroughly, and that usually shrinks it up back to original size. Sometimes putting it in the freezer can help too, getting it cold. Sometimes you have to use the float bowl to push the gasket back into place. Okay, I finally got that O-ring seated in here by kind of doing that. Alright, got things back in place here. Make sure you don't lose the little O-ring that goes on the end of that. You also don't want to tighten this up gorilla tight because you can strip it out, but you do want to snug it down. About like that. And make sure to put this back in place. That little pin there goes into the slot just like that. You can see now your choke's working again, and I believe we're ready to go back on the engine. And I'll show you how we do this, how we put it back together. Pretty easy, same way we took it apart. So you just slide this carburetor on. I think it's safe to put the fuel line back on. And once we get the carburetor pushed back into place, we can remount the linkages. Put the linkage back in place. And the spring. Have our fuel line all the way on. You might have to put a clamp back on that fuel line. Sometimes they leak when you put them back on. I think this one will be okay. Remember what I told you, don't forget this piece. Let's see, how does this go on? Like this? Nope. And we just slide this back in place. Reattach the breather hose. Alright, we're on. These two 10mm nuts back in place and snug things down. And we're going to be ready to go. And I go back and forth here until they're good and snug. Not too tight. Put the air filter back in place. And I do want to make sure the tank is completely cleaned out, so I have a rag down in here that I'm drying things out with. Also, once the tank sits out in the sun for a while and dries out, and you blow air down into it like this, all the sediment will come flying out. Let's change this spark plug first. I can tell it's old. And I always use NGK. It's a BPR5ES. Now for NGK spark plugs, you tighten them down just till they seat, and then you cinch it down about 3/4 of a turn. About like that. And I'll get this engine mounted back in place. Alright, things are tightened back up. I'm going to add some gas and we can test this thing out. Well, that was kind of a pain in the butt. No wonder Homelite went out of business. Alright, let's see if I can fill it up without spilling. I usually can't. Oh! See what I mean? Alright, so let's turn on this water supply here. Get some water flowing. So we'll want to turn the fuel valve on, and the choke is in the on position for starting. All right, let's see what we have here. First pull, not too bad.